out of a bad situation and they buy a bus ticket to California. They're like, I have to get out of here. The credit card company, the bus company, they're not going to release information to just some guy, but they very well may release information to her husband.
Wow.
And so it helps keep keeps tabs. It helps them in immigration laws, often based on family ties. So even just in the physical element, it helps them get people physically where they want them.
You made a comment that it's more acceptable if a marriage occurs. Can you talk about that? Who is it acceptable to? I'm not following that particularly.
So one of the cases I'd like to tell us about is the case of Sherry Johnson in Florida. So she was raped multiple times while she was under the age of 10. She gave birth when she was 10 years old to her rapist child. And when she was 11, her parents married her off to her rapist, who was a 20-year-old deacon at their church. Why it became acceptable and why they decided to do that was because there was a Child Protective Services investigation. And Child Protective Services stopped investigating the church and the family once there was a marriage because it was considered legally sanctioned. And it's kind of similar to prosecutors. They don't want to interrupt what is considered the family unit. So prosecutors won't go after these cases because they think of it as interrupting a family, despite the fact that there is rampant abuse going on.
You said the parents agreed to have her married?
Yes, the parents were the ones who did that.
Yeah. Now, when we speak about the children and the child, so say for instance, if it is a younger girl, she's 14, she's 15, she has a child, or she's found to be pregnant by the family. Oftentimes people might say, well, it's better for the child because they'll have insurance or they'll have a certain level of protection because they're married now. You know, maybe speak to that. You know, are there ways out for, you know, younger women who do get pregnant and they want to protect the child? Are there different ways or maybe different recourse that they can take to not be married? Is there, you know, other opportunities or?
I'd say the number one thing to know is that marriage isn't the only option that you have. You have other support systems. In terms of healthcare, a lot of people do say you should get married because then you will have your husband or spouse's health insurance. But we did find out that that child would automatically be eligible for medical assistance through the state of Minnesota, so they would have at least some medical coverage.
Good to know.
So that you don't have to get married in order to secure that coverage.
Nice, that's good to know.
Another thing I wanted to ask you is, you know, we're making kind of the assumption that, let's say if it's the young girl, like you said, you know, 14, 15, in a marriage, and maybe her parents signed her over. I mean, the magnitude and the enormity of that child having to weigh that decision. Well, my parents, who are supposed to love and protect me, have signed me over and said this is the right thing to do. So can you speak to that? How do you know, help a child like that when, you know, everything is almost against them? The very people that are supposed to protect and love them have signed them over.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that people kind of struggle with in this issue is, you know, we live in a country where we really like to say like freedom, and people don't want to entrench on that. So there's always kind of the thought of like, well, if, you know, she didn't tell the judge she didn't want to get married, she didn't tell her parents, like she, you know, she consented. And I think it's really important to realize like these children, I mean, they're children. These are young girls. And so, I mean, if you try to think back to when you were 14 and your parents were like, this is what's best for you, this is what you need to do to, you know, get where you want to go in life, like what, you know, 13, 14-year-old girl is, I think it's rare that you have a 13, 14-year-old girl who's going to be able to stand up and say, no, and I'm going to like call you out in front of a like a judge. There's just a lot of pressure. You've got your whole life to listen to your parents.
Well, you think of the confidence at that age, right? And the self-esteem. I mean, all those issues that go on at that young age.
I was thinking that this was another thing in our history that we kind of overlooked too, because this has been going on for years. I don't know if you all remember the movie The Color Purple.
Yes.
And in the beginning scenes of that movie, you know, the dad is, you know, thinking about marrying her off to this guy. And so that's always been a part of our history, and I think it's one of those things we kind of do want to keep quiet about because we haven't always had clean hands. Like you said, we can tell other countries, but have we really checked ourselves with those kinds of things? So I'm glad you're being advocates for this.
Do you know, I know in some other countries, because of poverty, when they marry off a daughter, there's a dowry. Do you know if in the U.S. or in Minnesota, when we have marriages of girls, is there any dowry that exchanges hands as a result?
I think it depends on the culture or the religion. It's not something that would be marked by the judges or anything like that. And like I said, we don't have any data on that, so it'd be extremely difficult to mark that down. And as Dr. Kennedy said, we're also not keeping track of cultural or religious only marriages that occur outside of the law. So it might be happening in a greater prevalence in those situations as well.
So is there any plan then to, I know you said you'd have to contact every single county, is there any plan to do that and start gathering some baseline data?
So originally that was the plan, was that we wanted to do all of that grunt work and get information. And then Senator Pappas and Dr. Kennedy decided that wasn't good enough. Getting the information is just going to confirm what we already know, and is that hundreds of young girls and young boys are getting married in the state of Minnesota. So what we're doing is trying to pass a bill, hopefully this session, that will make child marriage illegal in the state of Minnesota.
That's great.
What luck do you think you'll have? Who are the authors of the bill?
Senator Pappas and Representative Hare. So she's a freshman coming in, and there is a hearing scheduled for this Tuesday, so we are very hopeful.
That's great.
Then you'll be there.
Yes, I will be there, and I will be testifying in favor of the bill.
Good.
So moving forward, what can people do to become more aware? Because I think awareness is like the big first step. If we don't know about it, we can't do anything. So what avenues or what platforms are there so people can become more aware about this?
There's information on the World Without Genocide website. World Without Genocide also hosts a number of these kind of community talks that we have been speaking at, and that information, if you want to find one of those talks in your neighborhood or as close as you can get, would be on the World Without Genocide website as well.
Okay.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. This has been an intriguing conversation and enlightening too. Thanks so much to our guest today for sharing, and thanks to my fantastic co-host. It's been another brilliant conversation, and with that, we will see you next time on It's a Woman's World.